All right, everybody, we are back with Joe Moran, Joe Declan Moran, ladies and gentlemen. Al McGuire, you can call me Al, and the colorful journey of college basketball's original flower child with Joe, my friend and colleague John Dodds. I'm Tom Pippins, and we chatted as we were going in. You're the original basketball's original flower child on the college level, and he insisted he wanted that name in there.
Al insisted, Joe, you have to get something in there about the flower child, because he always looked at himself as a free spirit, somebody who kind of came and went as he pleased. And for example, when he was growing up in Rockaway Beach, he would just, at the drop of the hat, decide to take a trip to Albany. He would just go out to Albany, and his buddy Norman Oakes would get a note in the mail the following Monday, greetings from Al in Albany. He would just go off, and just like with his motorcycle, he'd get off on those motorcycles, and instead of turning right or left on, was it Capitol Drive?
Capitol Drive, yeah.
Out of his where he lived in Brookfield here.
His toy soldiers collection, all that good stuff.
Yeah, there was a time where, this was well after his coaching career was over. One of his former players was jogging through a park. I don't know if it was near Waukesha or Pewaukee, but as he got closer, he saw this guy at a picnic table with regiments of toy soldiers lined up against each other. And as he got closer, he said, "Coach?"
Yeah.
And it was him. Yeah. And it was somebody, he was just that way. If whatever mood struck him, he would just go and do it. And I always thought, as much as he enjoyed the motorcycle, I thought he'd never give it up. Yeah. But toward the end, the last couple of years of his life, he parked the motorcycle in the garage, and that was it.
Walked away.
He just couldn't do it anymore. But he was always that free spirit, that flower child, who would always not just smell the roses, but it was the wet grass and the light breeze that would shake a girl's skirt, something like that. That was always something that, the back to nature flower child that he was.
Yeah, he was one of those people. I've said it often, and John, you know him. By the way, back to the last segment, Al McGuire. Sorry, they're whisking away John Dodds. It's part of the legend of JD. But when Al McGuire walked into a room, or if you had an encounter with him, I think you came away a better person. When he passed away, I said, in his own way, I think Al McGuire was a very spiritual man. He did so many nice things for so many great people, including Joe, but you did a great thing for him. John, I know you want to get into all the people Joe interviewed for the book, in person, on the phone, that sort of thing.
Sure. Quick story about his motorcycle. I took a business class at Marquette. My undergraduate degree was in business, and I was with Linda Raymonds in this class. Late Linda Raymonds.
Hank's daughter.
Yeah, right. we miss her. She passed away about 10 years ago or so. And we were laughing because that day there was this picture of Al McGuire on his motorcycle in Wauwatosa on about 96th and Center. And what happened was, Allie and his wife, who lived there at the time, went out of town, and his babysitter was there. And so the babysitter with the two grandkids, so Al decides to go over to see the grandkids in his leather jacket and the motorcycle, and he goes up the driveway, and the babysitter would not let him in the house. And she called the Wauwatosa police.
Oh my God.
So the police come up, and then Al saw them, and he goes, "Hey, everybody," and Al, and he goes, "Peace, peace, Al McGuire here." He goes, "Coach," and they're both the policemen were shaking his hand. And
oh, by the way, I'm the grandfather.
Yeah, I'm a grandfather. I'm just trying to see my grandkids. And then, so the police walk Al up to the door, and they ring the doorbell, and the babysitter comes to the door, and she's like, "Yes, this is their grandfather." What? And you couldn't believe that a grandfather would be slicked back with all the leathers on. So Al thought that was such a great story that Linda was telling me that Al called up the Journal and said, "Send a reporter out." So he went over to Allie's house and had the motorcycle. And there's a picture of Al. That's what I saw. Which I said, "Hey, did you see the picture of Al today on the motorcycle?" And then she told me the background of the story. You know, it's just classic. He was a publicity hound up to a point. I mean, he had a funny story and he was entertaining, but then he could be a recluse too.
Yeah. It's Allie and Georgia must have had quite a, when they got back from being out, you know, to find out all that went on. And Allie, of course, a great player for his dad at Marquette and just a tremendous guy. But back to that book, Joe, You Can Call Me Al. Talk to us about interviewing people and how that, were there one-on-ones in person? Were you to some extent by the phone? You would expect that would be the case.
The total number of interviews, including in this 5th edition, was 140.
Wow.
And a number of those were telephone. There was some email correspondence as well. One of the things that George Reedy told me, George Reedy was my senior advisor at Marquette, and you probably remember that he was Lyndon Johnson's press secretary for 1 or 2 years back in the mid-'60s.
Wow.
And he wrote Twilight of the Presidency, which my agent Mike Hamelberg sold for him. I mentioned to George, I said, you know, I'm interested in going unauthorized on this because Al is going back and forth too much. You know, I'm getting, you know, time is running short because at the time he was probably in his early 60s. And I said to George, he's not going to live forever, and I need to get on this. And he said, well, you know, Joe, if you decide to go unauthorized, be prepared to have a lot of doors slammed in your face because Al's friends are loyal. And if Al doesn't go along with this, they're not going to go along with you. I wound up in getting a lot of information from Norman Oakes in Rockaway Beach. I also took a trip out to Rockaway Beach and to East Aurora, New York, where Al's sister, Kathleen, lived with her husband. And I spent time with Norman Oakes. I spent time with Jim Lytle and the Belmont Abbey boys. We had a meeting at Runyon's on 2nd Avenue in New York City. And we were up in an upper level room at Runyon's on 2nd Avenue. We were there 7:30 at night until 1:30 the next morning, just telling all kinds of stories. And it was a number of guys who were very, very close to Al, who played for him at Belmont Abbey, and the stories were just hilarious. And just getting those stories on tape, that was the first big thing. I did spend some time with Dick McGuire to find out the relationship with he and Al and the mom and dad. And I'd asked Dick, I said, you know, did your mom and dad ever feel like Al was going to be a coach, or if any of you were going to be a coach? And he said, you know, I think they probably would have just wanted us to take over the tavern.
Yeah.
You know, they didn't have any great interest in our pursuing basketball beyond playing. And I was fortunate during that time to also be put in touch with Bob Cousy. Wow. And Cousy had played against Al when he was with the Celtics during their heyday, and how Al always liked to say that I can stop Cousy. I can stop Cousy.
He played for the Knicks, Al did, didn't he?
Yeah, I can stop Cousy, and you know, he pointed at Dick. Al went on top of a table in Boston, and he pointed at Dick and he said, "You can't stop Cousy, I can." And so there was a big Cousy fan from one of the Boston newspapers. I believe his name was Cliffy Keene, and he just took the story and ran with it. And it went all over the wires. And of course, that was Al's way of publicizing the Celtics-Knicks rivalry. And of course, Walter Brown of the Celtics, who was the owner, he just loved it because they would sell out the Boston Garden. A number of others who I was very, very fortunate to talk to: George Mikan.
Really?
Red Auerbach. guys who played for him when he was at Dartmouth. There was a guy by the name of Rudy LaRusso who also played.
Played for the Lakers?
He played for the Lakers after he left Dartmouth. One of the great conversations I had was with Dave Gavitt. And his favorite Al story was a time when Noreen, Al's daughter, the boys were starting to come a-calling when she was in high school. And one day there was a phone call at the dinner table, and Al picks up the phone, and it's a guy for Noreen. And Al said, Noreen's not here. She's gone to Afghanistan. And Noreen goes to her room and locks her door. And when Al would try to make nice later on, Noreen wouldn't open the door. So the next day when Noreen came home from school, the door was taken off of hinges on her bedroom. And so that was the end of that. But those are some of the big names that I've been able to talk to. And I interviewed Bobby Knight, of course, and Rick Majerus and Hank. Hank was very, very good with spending a lot of time with me, giving me, some behind-the-scenes things. Ray Meyer couldn't have been nicer.
Really?
The couple of times I interviewed Ray, it was at his office in Chicago when he still had an office at the DePaul University basketball complex. And he was coming up with story after story after story, and it was almost as if he didn't want me to leave.
Wow.
Because he was so enjoying the stories. One of the people that I'm so fortunate that I got a hold of was John Wooden. I had called the UCLA basketball office one day, and who picks up the phone but Steve Lavin? Steve Lavin was an assistant then, I believe, to Jim Herrick. And I introduced myself, I told him what I had in mind, and I said, Coach, I'm doing a book on Al, and I'm trying to get a hold of John Wooden, and I don't know if there's a way that you can help put me in touch with him. So Steve Lavin gave me his telephone number at home. And so he said, if you get a busy signal a few times when you call, keep trying because he's a busy guy.
Yeah.
So when I finally did get through, I said, when I heard the phone ring out, I got him. Mm-hmm. I talked to him for 45 minutes. And he had an interesting story about Al going to New Zealand. After Marquette had won the national title, the university purchased him a trip to New Zealand. And John Wooden knew he was going there, and John knew a number of people in the country. So he gave Al names, addresses, and phone numbers of these people he knew. So when Al came back, when he was there, he didn't want anybody to know who he was. So if people asked him who he was, he would say, "Oh, I'm Reggie Sinclair from Manitoba." And when he came back, right before he decided to come back, I think it was a couple of days before he came back to the States, a guy asked him, what he did for a living, and Al decided to say who he was and what he did. And so he said, I'm a basketball coach. And the guy said, indoor or outdoor? And Al said then he knew it was time to come home.
Yeah.
But John Wooden asked him when he returned, why didn't you look up these people? He said, John, I know you're a teetotaler, and the real people in a country, you find them in a pub, in a tavern. And if any of your friends met me, they would never talk to you again.
What a great story.
But John Wooden couldn't have been more complimentary of Al and the type of person he was. What he really was impressed with was Al's honesty, his straightforwardness. And he always enjoyed listening to Al and Dick Enberg do games.
Mm-hmm. Boy, there's so much to cover here. We can go on for weeks and weeks, but John, when we come back, I want to take a little break here, and then you can talk about the first time you met Al. I mean, these are great stories you can say, all in the book. You Can Call Me Al, The Colorful Journey of College Basketball's Original Flower Child. Al McGuire, one of the all-time greats, and of course, so is this man, the
Thank you
author,
very much.
Joe Declan Moran. I'm Tom Pippins with John Dodds. We continue in just a jiffy.